making governor sauce. This is kind of like a tomato relish, but it has all these different vegetables in it. It was frequently used in the early 1900s to be eaten over steak or roast, so your red meats. I've found that I like it on a number of things, including mixed in with my scrambled eggs. My first step was to quarter and seed 11 pounds of tomatoes. Now I'll place these in my food processor and get them processed down, not so fine that I have a sauce out of them, but I want them pretty small, think relish size pieces. I then place all of my tomatoes in a big pot. Then I have 1/3 of a cup of salt, and I'm not going to use all of it for this step. I'm only going to use 2.5 tablespoons. And I just sprinkle that right along the top of my tomatoes. What this does is it helps draw the juices out of the tomatoes, which is great because then you don't have a really long cooking down process. Then I'll save the rest of the salt for another step. And the tomatoes, I'll go ahead and cover and let them sit for 3 hours, losing those juices. So it's been 3 hours. I can see quite a bit of juice has already separated from these tomatoes. So at this point, I want to drain that juice out. This is my husband's honey strainer. I actually love it. I use it for a lot of my tomato items. So I'm gonna let that sit for just a couple of minutes so it gets all of the liquid out of it, and then I'll put it back in the pan. The next step is to put all the fruits and vegetables through my food processor. I want this a nice relish type consistency. I prepared 5 red peppers by cutting them in half, removing the seeds, and then quartering those halves. I did the same thing for my 5 green peppers. I cut my half head of cabbage into smaller chunks so that they would fit well. It'll take a number of times through, but eventually I'll get all of these through the food processor. I also need to core and quarter 5 tart apples. I really prefer to use the Granny Smith, but today I'm using the Cosmic Crisp. Now I'll take 1.25 ounces of pickling spice, which is about a mounded half of a cup. And I'll put that in some cheesecloth. Then I'll place this in with my vegetables and fruit. I'll then add the rest of the salt that we reserved earlier, 1/4 of a teaspoon of chipotle pepper powder. This adds a little bit of flavor to it, but because of the quantity here, it doesn't actually add that much spice. And then 3 1/4 a cup of white vinegar. Then I'll put this on the stove and bring it to a simmer for 30 minutes. Now that it's been simmering for half an hour, I'll go ahead and turn it off, put it off to the side, and let it sit overnight with a lid on it. My sauce has been sitting all night, and now it's time to remove the spice bag. Now I'll return this to the stove and bring it to a boil. Now that I've got it to a boil, it's time for me to jar it. I fill up my pint-sized jars to 1/2 inch of headspace. Headspace is the space from the top of the food to the top of the jar. I try to kind of stir it along the way because the liquids and the solids will start to separate just a little bit. And I don't want there to be way more solid in one jar and way more liquid in another. Now is when I use my chopstick to make sure that I don't have any air bubbles trapped in there. Now I'll use a clean, damp cloth to clean off the rims of my jars, and then place my lids and rings on fingertip tight. So now I'll place my jars in the boiling water bath for 15 minutes if I'm at sea level. I'm at 1,200 feet, so I'm gonna go for 20. Now that it's come to a full boil, I'll go ahead and set my timer. Now that the timer's gone off, I'll remove the lid, turn off the heat, and allow it to cool for 5 minutes. I'll then remove the jars from the canner and place them on a heat-resistant surface 1 to 2 inches apart where they'll sit for 24 hours. After that point, I'll go ahead and remove the ring and wash them with hot soapy water, and then I'll place them in a cool, dry, dark location and use them in the next 1 to 3 years. Time for the taste test. So there's all these different flavors that you can taste. You get the multiple different vegetables, you get a little bit of that pickling spice, some of the vinegar. Oh, it's really, really good to add to so many things. So many of my recipes have become that way. You know, I make all these different sauces and they have all these great spices and herbs and vegetables in them. And if I add them to my meal, I don't have to cut up all of those tomatoes and cabbage and whatever later. I can just put it right in a soup, a casserole, a pasta salad. I do a lot for this one. And scrambled eggs. I actually kind of love this with my scrambled eggs. Oh, another thing that I've done is where I saute potatoes and onions and then throw this in there as well. And that's super good.